Hey, it's Liz D'Alto, and this is the Untamed the Wild Soul Woman podcast. From body image, sex, spirituality, money and relationships, to motherhood, creativity, business, communication, and desire, Untamed the Wild Soul Woman is the place to come for real stories and powerful advice to help you reclaim and redefine womanhood in the 21st century. Liz D'Alto here, creator of Wild Soul Movement and your host for Untame the Wild Soul Woman here. Today I have Amy Palko. I'm super excited. You could read her formal bio somewhere in or around the video. But I discovered Amy probably only about a month ago through our mutual friend, Foxy. And she had done a Forbidden Life conversation or Forbidden Conversation interview. And I was like, oh, I emailed her like immediately and I said, I need to have you for this conversation series. And she was all about it. And once I went to her website and I was like, okay, let me find out a little bit more about Amy. The thing that really drew me in about her, why I'm so excited to share her with you today, is something she said about losing herself to like the words or to the expectations of others and needing to come home to herself. And that is what this is all about, right? Women, we all at some point or another have probably had that experience, and then something happens, or gradually we realize, no, this isn't me. So Amy, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, so welcome. Thank you for asking.
The first question, and really the only question I've been asking every woman in the series, is this: what do you love about being a woman?
Oh my goodness, I love like almost everything about being a woman. It feels incredibly juicy and, just, oh, yes. What do I love most about being a woman? The embodiment, actually being in a woman's body. And actually feeling what it means to live in a woman's body, the way in which our bodies respond, the ways in which they move in the cycles, the ways in which we connect with the ground, with the soles of our feet, the way in which we carry around a void within us in our wombs. That feels like, I carry the divine in my body.
Yes.
All the time.
Yes.
That's a magical thing. Why wouldn't I love that? And of course as well, the fact that, I've got 3 children. So, that I got to conceive them. I got to gestate. I got to give birth to them. That's an incredible experience. That's profound.
Yeah. All right. So you said 2 things there that I want to dive into individually a bit more. The first, you mentioned grounding. And so far, I'm not all the way through these interviews yet, so maybe more people will talk about it, but this is the first time it's come up so far. Grounding. This is something, I didn't even have a concept of what this meant until a few years ago. And then once I did, I realized I've actually always been a pretty grounded person. And I think sometimes as women, we meet other people, but specifically women, because I think that's like a cultural thing where women don't always accept each other. And from the get-go, for some people, it's not their natural instinct to meet someone and to want to find reasons to like them. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I noticed for me was a trigger about other women is actually women who are not grounded once I understood the concept. So can you even talk about what does that mean to be grounded, and then how do you get grounded when you're not?
Sure. Well, not being grounded was actually really what drew me into really deep self-inquiry. I was in academia for a long time. I was studying at university, and so I was in very masculine environments, and I was being called to live from my head a lot, so I was always caught up with, reading and words and ideas and concepts and theories and, communicating them. So it was all very, very much in my head, and having to hold a lot in my head, And so then when I'm in the rest of my life, it's then very difficult to feel, actually. You numb out in your body when you're not grounded. So desire goes down, libido goes down. You actually, a really good indication of whether you're not grounded is when somebody says to you, what do you really want? If you could have, what would you wish for? And you have no concept of actually how you would even respond to that, because your body is one of those places where we want, it's the location of our desire. So if we're not grounded, then it's very difficult to feel into our desire. It's very difficult to know what it is that we want.
Yeah. So you said the way it used to be when you were in academia, since you lived a lot in your head, that wasn't grounding. So these days, now that you're much more aware of that and much more in your body, what are the things that maybe pull you out? Because none of us are grounded 24/7, right?
Of course not. Of course not. So yeah, definitely like moments of overwhelm. Do you know? And obviously we're having this conversation, and we're just we've got full lives, we've got lots of things going on. The kids have got their stuff going on, and there's like all this busyness, and so it gets very easy to become not grounded, disembodied, invested in the emotions or the relationships or the roles that we're committed to playing out in our lives.
Yeah.
Which means it's important that we have some form of embodiment practice, however that's going to look for you. And I use practice really loosely.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah.
can we chat about what are some of your practices? And I love that you're saying you added whatever works for you. So Amy might make some suggestions. You might try them and be like, I don't feel it. But it can point you in the direction of, hey, what might actually work for you? Or you might love them.
Exactly. I mean, I think of the way that I practice is through feminine practice. And by feminine practice, I mean that I ask myself the question of what would feel most delicious in my body, and then the practice is giving myself whatever the response is. So it's that simple, So it could be anything from, going for a walk outside. I live right next to the coast, so I go for a
Cool.
walk out to the harbour and feel sort of the full elemental embrace. Or I might, treat myself to some really beautiful piece of cake or chocolate, or it might be rest. Actually, it might be radical rest. It might be turning everything off, putting on a playlist that I know is like 1 hour long and just going, okay, well, that's my timer.
Yeah.
Just going to rest. Or it might be something like yoga, or it might be something, like I go for shiatsu sessions at least once a month. Or it could be an orgasm, or it could be a glass of wine. It could, it's what I give myself, whatever it is that my body needs to feel delicious. And that's
Yeah.
my
I like that. And what I noticed about you mentioned a range of things, but the thing that they all had in common was in some way, shape, or form enlivening or engaging with your senses. So if it's
yes.
go outside, that's getting the elements of nature. If it was eating something, it was like putting something literally pleasing to maybe your smell or your taste in your body. You talked about like even shiatsu or movement or orgasm, and that's all pleasurable sensation for the
Absolutely.
body and connection. So this idea, as you were saying that, I was envisioning everything coming in rather than going out. And I think that's a huge thing for grounding. So thank you. I love that.
Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned in that opening question something about holding the divine in your body. And the reason why that struck me so much is, and probably some women listening can relate, I was raised with a religious background. I was raised Catholic. I have no issues with what anyone believes in. To each their own is my firm belief. For me now, though, I'm much more spiritual than religious. And one of the reasons why that is because I love the concept of that God is within, not
Yeah.
without. It's not in a building. It's not because this person who's God's representative on earth says so. Like I find God inside of me, not outside. And there aren't all these rules and conditions about it. So can you say more about your relationship to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, I see, my womb space, as the void, as the potential, as the divine, as the mystery. So if I'm carrying that around with me all the time, and even if I was to have a hysterectomy, or so that I'm not actually even carrying the actual organ of the womb anymore, this space still exists.
Yeah.
This is like this energetic space, so we're always carrying it with us. That I can touch in with that at any point. Is that I just have to trust that it's there,
Yeah.
and again, various different practices whereby I can communicate. So I might do that through visualization. I might do that through flow writing. I might actually just do it through holding, through holding my body and actually giving myself touch, so just actually feeling my own embrace,
Yeah.
Fully engaging with what that means to be holding the divine.
I love that. I talk about touching myself all the time in any way possible, from just like massaging or tapping or patting or all these things. And I think so many people feel embarrassed, like, oh, I shouldn't have to touch myself. I should have someone to do that for me. So I love that you call that a divine practice, because it really is. It's like this sacred communion with yourself.
Exactly. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, from the spiritual perspective, if everything is divine, then why would you not be an expression of the divine?
Oh, yeah.
Why would you not be? And so if you want to celebrate the divine, this is the sacred vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
This is the sacred vessel through which you are experiencing your life and through which the divine is experiencing itself.
Yeah. Like, even you saying that, my whole body just feels like on. Like, yes, I'm alive. Thank you. Thank you for recognizing my magnificent power.
Because it's miraculous. It's truly amazing. These bodies are gifts.
Yeah, it totally is. So I don't know if you've noticed, I write things down as you talk because I want to not be able to forget later. So if I'm looking down, I'm totally paying attention. I'm actually taking notes because this is great. You mentioned flow writing, and that was one of the things that really hooked me immediately when I went to your website. Your words, you're such a beautiful, amazing writer. So for people, even if they don't have a blog, even if they're not, creating any kind of content, writing I find to be a really powerful way to connect to myself, whether it's in a journal or somewhere else. So can you say more about what is flow writing? How could anyone do that?
Yeah, well, flow writing is stream of consciousness writing. So it's throwing out all of those rules, which for somebody who teaches English literature at universities, I found this a challenge. So, you throw away all the punctuation, you don't worry about the spelling mistakes, you just allow it to flow out on the page. And what I'll generally do is I'll set a timer. Because I find if we have a temporal container for our words, then it actually gives us full permission to allow whatever is going to come through. Mm-hmm. And the practice that I actually have for this is set the timer for 10 minutes, flow write, so whatever is off the top of my head completely. And it can even be, I can't think of anything to write. Oh my goodness, I'm now writing about not having anything to write. I have nothing to write. So whatever it is, and I have written that. And doing that for 10 minutes and then looking through it and circling any of the words which have a little bit of resonance about it, have a bit of sparkle. And then I take one of those words and I write it at the top of the next blank journal page, almost like putting a pin in a map or something, like a marker. That's the word, the marker. Yeah. Set the timer again for now 10 minutes. Flow write again. And then repeat the process. So then you have 3 sets of flow writing. That third piece of flow writing, I don't know how that process works, but the stuff that comes through in that third piece is I don't know. So I feel like it's come from somewhere else altogether.
I love that. And then what do you do with it? Is it just for expression?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of my writing doesn't get shared, doesn't go online. In fact, some of the flow writing that I did then got crafted into the poems that then informed the collection from Revolutionary Lips. Mm-hmm. But like I said, some of it will never see the light of day. And it was only for me. It was only to show something or to reflect something back that I needed to fully integrate.
Yeah. So I love that right now. I'm currently signed off of Facebook for the entire month of December. Because there was something we talked about, feeling not grounded earlier or feeling overwhelmed. And again, not everyone here has a business or is any kind of entrepreneur, but I don't think you need to be to get sucked in that feeling of social media, what gets shared and what doesn't. And I love what you just said about some of this writing never sees the light of day. It's just for me. And that comes back to this loop of a couple of things that we've already mentioned around sacred for ourselves, right? I feel like, and especially, I don't have kids, but imagine as a mom with 3 kids, probably a lot of your life revolves around what are you doing and how are you serving others. So I love that you give that to yourself, and I love that it's simple, because I think people bounce from, self-help, personal development, book to book, program to program, seeking and not realizing how much of it is just right here at home.
Yeah. I have to speak to that seeker piece, because this is I had such a big revelation around this the other month there, when I realized just how much we're all in that process of seeking, and that if we stopped being seekers and started being finders, even if you just change that one word, it's like, maybe I could be a finder instead.
And for someone like you who's a wordsmith, isn't it funny how it's just like flipping one little word? It makes such a big difference. I feel that.
Exactly. Oh, the word finder has such a different resonance from the word seeker, because seeker suggests that you're on a continual journey, that you're always looking outside of yourself in order to, attain the next level, or to understand the next unveiling or revealing or whatever it is. Whereas the finding, it actually, gives you a sense of achievement. And it calls you back into the moment. It calls you back into presence in a way that seeking doesn't.
And I love, so there's something to me about the word finder, and you keep saying resonance, which I really love that word as well, because it does. I feel like the minute something resonates, you pause.
Yeah.
And there's something about the seeking that feels like very perpetual without pause, without rest. And
exactly.
This has been something that has come up a lot in these conversations, how, our global culture, it's not even just here in the US, you probably find it too, is not one that really honors or celebrates ritual, rites of passage, or major life transitions. It's always just like, what's next?
Yeah. So what's next? What's next? This continual sense of not being happy with what you currently have. And actually, this is something which is very much bound up in the language of consumerism. Because you'll notice actually that once you buy a product, what the salesperson will say to you as they pass it over, they'll go, happy? and you'll go, oh, yes, I am, now that I've received this new television. Until I realize actually that, in 6 months' time, a new television's come out, and then all of a sudden, I'm no longer happy, so I need to go out and buy the next one.
Yeah. Let's pause on that for a minute. Consumerism, and that, again, the perpetual seeking, or the perpetual, it's really programming. We are programmed to get tired of things and want more things.
Yeah, we are.
But what's behind the things? So what are those? What's the happy? What's the real joy? What's the real desire behind the stuff? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, well, for me, it's about this respect of the sacred pause, or actually the gap which opens up between the desire and the thing. Yeah. And it's about recognizing actually that our desire isn't something which we get to invest in something else, or we can invest in something else, but we won't necessarily ever feel fulfillment through that process. So in actual fact, what we can do is take full ownership of our own desire. And again, so that's bringing it out of that place of the seeking, bringing it out of the material gain, bringing it out of, thinking that once I find the perfect person, once I have the perfect body, once I have the et cetera, then I'll be happy. It's about bringing it back home first, fully owning your own desire, and allowing yourself to live from that place.
Yeah. So let's stay here for a second. That idea of coming home, like I said earlier, that was one of the things that really drew me in about you. Just that was like right there in like the second paragraph on your website. 'Cause I'm like, oh, me too, girl. So what was that? Tell us that piece of your story, if you don't mind, of where you found yourself not at home, and then how you came home.
Yeah, well, for me, it's been a really interesting journey. I had kids very young. So I had my daughter when I was 19. And when I was 20, I was very heavily pregnant with my second. and we decided to go on a big move up north, so up to the north coast of Scotland. If you don't know Scotland at all, there's nothing up there apart from sheep. So sheep and a lot of weather. So we moved up there, and I really feel in many ways that I was initiated by the wild. I
Oh,
gave in that place. The birth was very quick, so I couldn't get to the hospital. So it was a home birth in this wild, really wild location. So really feel in many ways I was initiated into this kind of wild woman piece at that stage. Then after the birth of my third baby, we moved back down to the Central Belt, um, which is much more populated, and much more sort of driven by more consumerist ideas, and more sort of cultural ideals of what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a mother, what it is to be a wife, and really started to lose sense of who I was within that dynamic. But fortunately, having had this really strong initiation so early, was very aware actually that there was something really not right here. When you start hand sewing party bags, you know something's gone wrong. Do you know, which is what I was organizing these incredibly elaborate, all my energy, all my creative, everything was going into my partnership and with my husband and in the relationship that I have with my children, which is a beautiful thing until there's no sense of who you are anymore. So there's no sense of your own self-expression, no sense of your own creativity. You don't have that intimacy with who you are anymore because it's all been invested everywhere else. And it was actually at that point that I went back to university, because it was really a recognition that I needed to carve out something for me. And that was a very safe place for me to kind of invest that. But in doing so, was delivered back to myself in the sense that I had an outlet for my own self-expression. I was actually starting to use my brain for myself again, but not coming fully into my body because it's such a mental process space. So it was really coming out of that, and in the last 5 years, really inviting myself to come home to my body. So it's been this kind of 16-year journey, from this wild initiation into sort of into the wilds of suburbia, where I felt myself constricted, very contained, forcibly sort of pushed out of my wild soul self. Trying to find it again, moving through academia, which has eventually brought me to where I currently am, which is a lot more grounded.
Yeah. So there's two things of that I want to take a little bit deeper.
Sure.
Once you realized, wow, okay, I don't feel like myself. Was there's something I sense in there around not wanting to conform to maybe what all the other moms were doing. How did you deal with not really wanting to do things the way everyone else does them? Was there any fear around not fitting in, or I can imagine with kids, there's probably an extra layer of not wanting it to reflect on them, like, oh, their mom's different or anything like that. How'd you navigate that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that was quite profound, but especially as a young mum, trying to find her way, and, trying to make sure that I was doing everything, right for my children. So yeah, it was very difficult to kind of disconnect myself from the kind of cultural programming that we have around that, and that was really coming up in the kind of dissonance that I was experiencing. Unfortunately, I have a very strong partner. I have a very strong husband, who is very grounded, and so he would see me doing something, and he would just stop me and go, "This isn't you."
Oh, that's so great.
So I had somebody who would call me out. And I think it's actually so important that we have people around us that will call us out. So whether that's a really strong partner, whether that's a girlfriend, whether that's a soul sister, whether it's a coach, whoever it is, but we have that support circle that will reflect back to us, this is not you.
That's really amazing. And so the second part of that was you've used the word more than once of initiation.
Mm-hmm.
And I love it because this takes us back to, have you ever read Mists of Avalon?
No, I haven't. It's on my Kindle.
Oh man, I just read it recently, and that's something. And again, whatever your beliefs are, it doesn't matter. But just like in mythology, in these old stories, it takes place in the time of King Arthur's court, but from like the women's perspective, similar to the Red Tent, which is the women's perspective of biblical times. There's a lot more honoring of these initiations, of these times in our life, even as a woman, like when you have your first period, you know, I bet a lot of us can think back of our first period and it was not treated like an initiation.
Not a sacred moment, no.
Not a sacred moment, just like, here's the pads and the tampons or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
How can we identify and honor periods of initiation in our lives?
Well, for one way that I've managed to do it for myself is actually recognizing how to hold space of initiation for others. You know, so actually looking outside of myself, and so looking at my daughter, for example. So when she had her first period, or you know, she had her 16th birthday just in the summer there, and how do we want to celebrate this? How do we want to honor this? The other way is that I have a circle of friends who we really honor this in each other. So if we've got a particular moment in our lives, then we gather in order to celebrate it, which is what you would do anyway, but really bringing that kind of reverence to the process.
Yeah.
You know, and inviting it in and going, how would you like to honor this moment? How would you like to honor this moment? And asking that of yourself. You know, so if it's your birthday, which is, you know, perhaps one of the most common initiation, you know, it's another solar return, you know, how do you want to honor today? How do you want to honor this moment? You know, are there so many different firsts or endings or, you know, these moments of celebration, which again have been so co-opted by consumerism. So it's very easy to kind of just sort of lapse into, you know, the standard, what's expected, what's done. But actually, you know, disconnecting from that and asking yourself, what would fully honor today? What would fully honor this moment for me?
I love that so much. And it connects to earlier to what we said about just like taking a pause. Taking a pause and even asking, how do I want to honor this? And even when you get that first answer going, is this me?
Yeah.
Is this me, or is this what I think I'm supposed to be doing? Because when you were saying that, I'm imagining, you know, girls' night out, everyone goes out to a bar and gets wasted. Instead of, you know, I can imagine there are times when there's maybe only 3 women, not everyone, right? Maybe just 3 really special women that I'd want to just have over, maybe cook so I can like put the love into the food, maybe have some wine, maybe not. You know, people can come in their pajamas so they're comfortable, and all these elements of, you know, how do I want this moment to feel versus, like you keep saying, with consumerism, we think we're supposed to, you know, have a bachelorette party in Vegas or, you know, go to this thing or buy something instead of creating the exact kind of ritual or celebration that really feels like you. I love that.
I mean, I think back to my, you know, my daughter's, you know, sweet 16, you know, party, which was me and my soul sister and Aurora, my daughter. So it was just the 3 of us. We set up the lounge so that it was a sacred tent space. We created an altar with photographs of her. We had 16 candles, like tea lights. I had written 8 blessings that I would wish for her, and my friend wrote 8 as well. And then we each read out one after the other and lit each one of the candles. And it's such a simple ceremony, but it was really honoring her, but it was also really honoring us. Do you know, it really, you know, what would I have wished for myself at the age of 16?
All right, so I might cry. That is so amazing. So amazing. And I love that question too. What would I have wanted for myself, because I think about even the culture. I don't know. Do they do this in Scotland? These big Sweet 16 parties that are like ridiculous, over the top, and it becomes much more about like the flash than the actual event.
Yeah.
There's a piece in that ritual you just described of also like connecting the generations. Like imparting that like intergenerational wisdom that, again, I just don't think is very alive in our current culture.
Yeah, I mean, the matrilineal lines of initiation have been broken down, something like, which is why the reason why something like Clarissa Pinkola Estese's Women Who Run the World is so incredibly popular, because we all recognize there's a craving for this matrilineal initiation. And the spaces, we aren't holding the spaces for it. As a culture, we're not holding the spaces for these initiations to occur on a mass cultural level.
Yeah.
So recognizing that it's a lack or it's something that's missing for you, holding it for another person, and then fully receiving it as the gift, what you would have wanted, and receiving that in the process.
Yeah. That's so amazing.
Like, why wouldn't there be a reason for, us to have an initiation into for our first period? Why wouldn't we celebrate that now? Because we could.
Yeah.
There's no reason for us to not to have a celebration for that. To celebrate our cycle, to celebrate the magnificence actually of what our bodies do on a month by month basis. We could decide to do that on our next bleed.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying about making it individual. You mentioned something about like, it's not mass accepted in culture, but what's so great is that it just doesn't need to be, right? I think sometimes, and maybe there are women paying attention or watching who are coaches or some kind of leader or some kind of writer, and I know I get sucked into this sometimes. You can let me know if you do, where I want to it goes back to what we said earlier about what needs to get shared and what doesn't. It's like I discover this thing and I'm like, oh, everyone needs to know this, but no, like my healing, my celebration does affect the collective too.
Of course.
Doesn't have to be, and at what point does actually my sharing take away from my experience? Am I diluting my own experience? Instead of just keeping something, and again, that word for like the 5th time now, keeping stuff sacred. Yeah.
Keeping stuff sacred and really respecting the intimate relationship with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think something like a journal and doing your flow writing in that space and allowing yourself the privacy, the permission to be private. And in this day and age, we are living so much of our lives online. We are so caught into this idea that we are our personal brands, and that there's there's a big dislocation actually between, the felt lived experience of the moment and the way it's being represented, the way it's being expressed.
Yeah. I'm also noticing lately too, something I was never aware of before is the perception of others, the assumptions that people make, and that energy that people put on you. Before the call started, you and I were talking about, being interviewed and people asking questions you don't want to answer, or that's just like, just a boundary, right? Or I had a call with a client the other week and we were talking about relationships, and I shared something that happened recently in my relationship, and that was a challenge, that was a struggle. And she said, oh, it's good to know that perfect life coach couples have issues too. And I'm like, if by perfect you mean human, yeah, we got it. But it's just really funny, the meaning and the assumptions that we're all constantly placing on stuff that we're probably not even aware of, that can be a bit damaging.
Yeah, well, what's that phrase is, don't compare somebody's outsides to your insides.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a huge, a reminder piece, that, yes, of course, my life isn't all perfect. It's not all roses. I am committed to fully receiving the richness and the fullness of my life.
Yeah.
And that means, which I think was shared through the poetry and from Revolutionary Lips. And sometimes there's really dark stuff there. Sometimes we're sort of mired in the shadows, but there's gold there too.
Yeah.
So don't try and limit your experience because you believe that you have to be living in the light all the time, or you have to be meeting all of these kind of ideals, because in doing so you're missing a whole other part of your life, which is calling to fully nourish you in your experience of your now.
Yeah, and actually, if you're watching this, my interview with Foxy, who I mentioned earlier, which is how I found Amy, we talk all about the shadow side and how to go there, how to go to that place. And really, I love that you used the word fullness, because that's what the human experience is about. Like, we are spiritual beings having a human experience, so we're still human.
Yes.
That's why we're given this body, and we get to feel things, and we can't necessarily teleport or do all this fantasy stuff, and it's freaking okay.
Yeah, well, it's more than okay. It's more than okay, because this is what we're here for. This is what we're here for. This spiritual experience piece. If that's the umbrella, if that's the macro of our existence, we are actually here to have the human experience.
Yeah.
We're actually here to be embodied. We're actually here to feel the beauty of enfleshment.
Enfleshment. Ooh, I like that.
I think I just made that up.
I think you did, but I like it.
But yeah, I mean, and yes, it's not pretty all the time.
No.
And yes, it's messy. And yes, it's shadowy, or it's fierce, or it's loud, or it's unacceptable. Women, we need to reclaim these parts of ourselves that have been deemed unacceptable.
Yeah. Because deemed by who?
Exactly. Because so much about the embodied experience is actually thought of as disgusting or unappealing or unattractive, which is why we have Photoshop. So then we get to gloss over all of these parts of the body which just aren't, or they're not allowed. They're not permitted expression.
Yeah.
So
that was when we did our photo shoot for the website this year back in April, that I said, I'm like, we're not doing Photoshop. I cannot possibly have a brand called Wild Soul Movement that is all about helping women come home to themselves, feel at home in their bodies, and trust, love, and accept themselves exactly the way they are, and use friggin' Photoshop in my pictures. Now, does that mean we used every single picture? No. There were plenty of pictures that I was like, all right, that one's not going up. But there were also some where I was like, we're good. That's my real body right now, so that's what's going up.
This is so up for me with my because I do self-photography, which is it's something I've done as a practice for well over 2 years now. So what I do is I take photographs, maybe as much as 20 at a time, and then I put them through editing. So, but it's very creative editing. It's not, it's not like smoothing out all the edges and getting rid of the dark circles or slimming the jawline, or there's this kind of radical, this is radical editing. And it's been fascinating because I get to have a creative expression of myself and how I'm looking and how I'm feeling, and start to bring those two together in an expression of art.
Yes. So I really like this because we have this selfie culture now, right? Of people just like posting a selfie on Instagram. And do you know Hannah Marcotti?
Yes, I do. I
just signed up for her. She's like 24-day or however many days it is program called Sexy and Sanguine. And because it's all about that, like taking self-photography, being super sensual, and she gives you prompts. I'm like, this is amazing because, again, it's something else in our culture that you can look at this concept and it could be perverted to mean, oh, it's self-indulgent, you're trying to show off, blah, blah, blah. or it could just be self-inquiry and self-observation. So say more about that.
Yeah, well, I see it as self-centered, actually, and I see that as a good thing.
Yeah.
Do you know? Because if I'm centered in myself, then I'm not projecting anything on anybody else. I get to fully own my shit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know? So the whole self-photography thing, it allows me to reflect myself back at me. It makes me more aware of who I am and how I'm choosing to present myself in the world. And that feels, that feels super generous. It feels exquisitely generous because I'm not then demanding that from anybody else. I can let everybody else be them because I'm showing up as me.
This is so good. So if you're watching, I just want to really hone in on that point of being able to say, let me not get this from all out here from everybody else. Let me go here. Let me go in. So I would love to know, because I've had this experience. Maybe you do or maybe you don't. I'm going to imagine you do as a human woman. You take 20 pictures and you're flipping through and some of the thoughts are probably not that nice.
Of course.
How do you manage that? How do you keep it? How do you come back to love and acceptance for yourself?
Well, I think I just keep coming back to, how would I feel if this was my best friend? Or how would I feel if this was my mum? Or how would I feel if this was my daughter?
Yeah.
Or, and actually thinking, well, how would I want them to see themselves? If I can look on myself through it with the eyes of love. Yeah. Or then I think of, how would my children see me through this lens? Because my children see me with love. It's an unconditional love relationship. So if I can see myself through their eyes, even if I can't see myself with that amount of love and that amount of acceptance, if I can use somebody else's perspective to get me to that point, then that's what I'll do.
I love that. And what a great point that is. And I think this is something that I talk about in Wild Soul Movement with my women and came up really beautifully in summer sessions. Someone shared she was having a rough day. And whereas she normally would have been pulled into beating herself up and being all down, she was like, I asked myself, what would I say to my best friend right now? She's like, and then she just took exquisite care of herself for the rest of the day. And I was like, yeah, that right there is counterculture. It's almost like that consumerism, that media magazine thing to pick yourself apart and want to be better. I think about all those headlines. It's do this, lose 5 pounds, look sexier, get this wardrobe. So you're right about all these messages constantly being dropped and planting seeds about needing more or needing something else. And again, just coming back in.
It's about I really feel as though it's about understanding our desire. I feel as though feminine desire has been co-opted, so that we're told what it is that we should want. And if you don't want that, then there's actually something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And if it's wrong with you, then you just better stay silent because you don't want to attract attention because that's just going to be unattractive. And is there anything worse than being unattractive?
It's nice to be able to laugh at it, but I bet there's some people watching going, yeah, nothing is worse than that. And
yeah, of course, because that's what we're getting fed all the time. So, and we're all party to it.
Yeah.
Do you know, we're all experiencing this. This is not just something that's just experienced by a select few. Do you know, I'm as impacted by this as much as anybody else is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I agree. And even if it's not one thing, it's another. I recently moved to Southern California and there's a new community here. And I find myself sometimes feeling do I need to conform to the way they are? And really, I'm much better about it now. But whenever it comes up, I'm come back here. What would honor me? Who am I really? No, I don't need to talk like that. No, I don't need to be like that. And also, no, I don't need to judge myself that that's not for me.
Yeah. Yeah, because, you can either choose to opt into the framework, the cultural framework that's already been established, or you get to go your own sweet way.
Yeah, it's true. It's totally true. And so for anyone watching this who feels those pressures, or maybe you've always felt that way. I interviewed Latham Thomas the other day. She's so great. Her brand is called Mama Glow. And she was saying, she's I was always just different from the time she was young. And not everyone has that sense when they're young that they're different. And are okay with it. I think she's an anomaly, that she was like, I just knew I was different and I was just different, instead of I knew I was different and I tried to be the same as everyone else. But I think it's totally okay. So we're here to tell you, if you're different, that's amazing. Be you. Don't worry about conforming. And it might be, I feel like some people might feel lonely. So did you feel lonely when you were in that mom space of like, oh man, I don't want to do things the way everyone else is doing it? What was that like?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think back to sort of the experience of having children, moving up north and moving back, and, being in that state of toddlerdom, where actually you lose your name. Everybody refers to you as somebody else's mum.
Oh,
So you become your child's mother rather than Amy.
oh,
So
wow.
for a long time, they actually discovered that nobody had actually called me Amy other than my husband, which is a really weird thing. So yeah, I mean, I felt terribly lonely. I didn't even feel like anybody could see me anymore, And that was one of the reasons why I returned to the university space, because it was one of the places where I felt really seen and I felt really heard. As I could sit and I could take my place amongst equals and be heard. So yes, of course, it's profoundly lonely, and it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, and it's all okay.
It's all okay. I love that. That's super beautiful. So the point there that I want to pull out, what you said, is when you notice that you don't feel seen or heard, to go and ask yourself, right? What would make me feel that way? That's really genuine to me, because anyone, and again, we live in this world where, sure, I can go write a Facebook status and 75 people will like it. And so, okay, I was seen and heard, but is that really how I want to nourish that desire? Maybe the answer is yes, sometimes maybe it's not. But always coming back to what's really me, what's really me, what's really me. That's one of the biggest things I'm taking away from everything that you talked about today. So thank you.
Oh, so welcome. I mean, I think women's circles actually would be one way that, if we had like a huge movement actually of women establishing circles where, of all ages, that we could really honor the initiations. We could really bring in the experience of sacredness, of these sacred pauses in the busyness of our lives, where we actually could all really see one another. We could reflect back to each other the truth of ourselves, and where we could be seen, where we could be heard, where we could be held, where we could experience touch, and where we could be told it's okay. It's all okay.
Yeah. And I think there is a rise of that. I mean, even in my own community, we randomly had women go, hey, can I start a group of wild soul women in New York City and DC? And now there's like 10 or 12 groups, like all over the US, one in the UK. And I'm like, yeah. I see, Danielle Laporte with Desire Map. Those ladies, they meet in circles everywhere. So this is cool. No matter who you are, you don't need a brand. You don't need a business. You just need a handful of girlfriends to be like, yo, let's get together and talk about how we really feel, not how we think we are supposed to, and like what's actually going on.
Yeah. I mean, I've met up with a group of women on a monthly basis for the last couple of years, and it's been profoundly helpful. It is so, so helpful, and really, really creating the conditions for self-liberation.
Yeah.
Knowing that you have that kind of support.
So I'd love to wrap up with this, because I think this is an actionable thing that people can do. How did you and your women in this circle, how did you form your circle? And how did you create the container for it? Because I think, it's not just like girls' night out. How did you create maybe agreements or expectations around the purpose and set the intention to keep it, to make it a sacred space?
Sure. I think there needs to be a certain ownership of the space. There has to be an agreement that we're entering into a space here where we're all actually here to hold one another, but we're all actually holding ourselves too. So I'm not demanding of anybody else to do anything for me, to perform any kind of action for me. I'm going to take full responsibility for myself in the space, and I'm here to deliver love.
Yeah.
I'm here to speak what I need to say and to deliver what I need to deliver. So there's that expectation set straight away that it's a sound, safe, sacred container, So, however you choose to establish that, whether that's through setting, whether that's through time, whether that's through ritual and ceremony, then that's what you do. And then there's this understanding that we're all here to respect one another. There's that respect, allowing another person to feel heard. So whether that's the use of something like a talking stick or however you want to manage that, but allowing people to have that opportunity to fully say what it is that they need to say uninterrupted.
Yeah.
Because women get interrupted. So allowing a woman to speak uninterrupted, huge gift. Give her a talking stick.
Oh man, that's so great. Well, this interview has been a huge gift, Amy. Thank you so much. And so if you want to check out Amy, she does. And I just downloaded it and I haven't gotten through the whole thing yet, but it's Revolution of Lips. Is that what it's called, or am I messing that up?
From Revolutionary Lips.
From Revolutionary Lips is her poetry book. It's on her website, amypalko.com. And this is just, if I had to just describe this whole conversation, for me, it was beautiful and simple. I love the way everything came back to being really simple, really sacred, and really focused on yourself. I love that. So thanks.
Beautiful. Thank you, darling. Thank you.
We'll talk to you later.
And afterwards, I think it's an interesting world that we live in, where we have this a man and a woman living alone in a home raising a child, and it's so off and weird. And so we've had a lot of community come and be with us in the last year, and I've just many times had to realize that I, as a mother, need to be mothered in order to have the energy to continue mothering. And so I think that it's meant to pass down, whether it's your grandmother mothering you or your aunts or your friends or whatever, but that energy can come through from different people.